scale wise, first of all, we can't sustain this scale, these kinds of numbers, because neither one of those two industries can keep functioning at the level they are. So we have to reduce overall. In the US, most fish is farmed. So it's obvious that we have to reduce, and that includes farmed fish. But the reason we can't just go back to wild fish is because they're already at the brink. These fisheries are at the brink, and they keep getting worse every year. So we have to reduce pressure on them as well. And of course, with wild fish, a lot of the problems of, toxic chemicals like mercury, exposure to bacteria and antibiotics from, passing through these farms or from wastewater. A lot of these problems still persist in wild fish. And then, of course, the welfare problems and the extremely inhumane conditions that they're subjected to in these nets and then being thrown overboard and then, slaughtered. And it's all just horrific. So we're really advocating for an overall reduction or, elimination if you can.
Yeah, no, I know you are. And those are really good arguments. But it is a little trickier than the land animal thing, where you kind of just don't have to eat. Like if people are eating a high welfare in animals, it's really expensive. If it's not really expensive, it's definitely not quote unquote high welfare. Anyway.
We obviously also are, giant proponents of not living a life that is centered around exploitation of animals in any capacity. What are your thoughts, either personally or as an advocate, about the word vegan?
Yeah, I mean, I personally use the word vegan, and I have no problems with it. I think that it's a great way to, identify living a life without consuming animal products. It depends on the audiences we're talking with, because, some of the decision makers that we're going to and presenting these ideas to might unfortunately not resonate with the word vegan. So we talk a lot about reduction and, eating more plant-based foods. And the decision makers we're talking with often are serving foods in large, cafeterias. And so we want them to see, plant-based foods are great. A lot of people are eating vegan. It's more inclusive for your menu. There's, allergens you can avoid. It's more climate friendly. So we might not always use the word vegan when we're talking with certain people, but yeah, I use it for myself for sure.
Yeah, and I want to get into more of your work in both, individual messaging, but it looks like you're focusing a lot on institutional providers. But there was another issue I wanted to get into first, and I just think this is a really interesting issue. And I'm wondering, since you are dealing with both salmon and shrimp, are your main focus, I think, for the moment, because there's a lot of sea animals out there. Like, do you differentiate, like when you're talking about welfare, do you differentiate between fish and shrimp, or I guess it could even come to clams or oysters, animals whose sentience is really not clear to people? It's really not necessarily clear to even scientists. When you keep reaching to a further level. Do you talk about levels of sentience or sophistication of sentience, or is it just like since you're only dealing with shrimp, but imagine you're dealing with others as well? Is it just like they're sentient or they're not, and you feel you can convince people of that, or do you just avoid the issue completely? I'm always so curious. Now that we've discovered that everybody out there is sentient, I think our messaging on the issue has become so much more complex. I'm just wondering how you handle it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We don't talk a lot about it with decision makers who are, concerned about their menus and all of that. But for me personally, in my work, I've always had a huge affinity for crustaceans and been keenly aware of their ability to suffer. Several years back, I guess it's been about 10 years or so now, but I founded a project to help hermit crabs who were being, or still are being, caught from the Caribbean and sold on the beach here in the US at shops during the summer. And it's a really cruel industry because they're taking these animals who can live for 30 years out in the wild and putting them into tiny cages where tourists will take them home. And then they basically die of suffocation over the course of a few months because the air isn't humid enough and they require very specific conditions. So for me, crustacean welfare has always been a huge concern of mine. I have a particular love for crustaceans. And I think, science has shown us like they can rub wounds when they're hurt. They can form bonds, they can work together. So I think, the sentience is pretty clear and we need to be able to recognize that for all sea animals.
I mean, I'm sure there's still people who think that fish, like the salmon, aren't sentient at all. Like, do you run into that a lot, or do you just avoid it, or like it's just
Yeah,
bizarre to me that people still
yeah.
think that fish, like, I don't know, they think they're like vegetables or so. They're just wandering around like completely unconscious or something. Do you push it, or do you just focus on when you run into obstacles on those, or just focus on the environmental? You have so many different issues you could turn to. Uh,
Yeah, I think we're realizing that too more as we get into this, and we're now purposely emphasizing the term sea animals. I know you said something about that earlier because we want to make sure that they are being seen as animals and we're not reinforcing the idea that they're just seafood. So, it's taking some language adjusting because when you're hearing people say
yeah,
seafood over and over again and not thinking
yeah,
of them as animals, we
yeah,
do want to subtly like not reinforce that and really drive home that they are animals just in small ways so that it can open their minds up to slowly changing and seeing things differently. So for sure. And the other thing is when we talk about the diseases that these fish suffer from, we definitely emphasize the suffering that they go through with those diseases or with those injuries that they receive, so you know we don't kind of hide those details. We want people to realize that there is suffering there.
yeah.
So
Makes
before
sense.
we close, and I am interested in chatting with you further for our flock bonus content, but before we do that, I'd love to know a little bit more specifically about your outreach efforts. Like, who are you talking to? I'm assuming it's not generally our henhouse listeners that's your main audience, but we're the allies. And what is your ask, especially on an institutional level?
Yeah, so our main audiences right now are environmental leaders because, I think fish has been pushed as this eco-friendly solution for so long that a lot of environmental organizations and professionals have embraced aquaculture as a sort of solution. And so we're talking with them. We really want to see the environmental movement move away from all animal products and toward plant-based eating. And we're also working on universities and really anywhere that serves food. I think events are a really good place for starting out because conferences can easily, make a decision for their conference that then sort of sets a precedent for years to come. So our basic kind of asks for them are to reduce sea animals that they're serving and prioritize more plant-based options. Definitely keep shrimp and salmon, farm shrimp and salmon off the menu, and then to not be pulled into these greenwashing labels. So we've seen a lot of places that have committed to using labels or guides like Seafood Watch, none of which really ensure good sustainability or welfare or human health for that matter. So we want them to just be aware of those and to not fall for using them as a commitment to signal sustainability when that's not really the case.
Hmm.
And just to clarify, you are not in the business of recommending quote unquote high welfare sources of fish.
Nope, nope. We're fully promoting drastically reducing the amount of fish that is being served across the US.
Mhm.
Okay.
So tell our listeners how they can find out more about the Aquaculture Accountability Project and get involved with your efforts.
Yeah, so you can find us. It's a long URL, but you can find us at aquacultureaccountability.org. You can shoot me an email from there. There's an easy contact form there. We have social media too. Aquaculture Accountability is our handle for the most part because it's a little shorter than the whole name. And yeah, we would love, especially students. I think that's a really great opportunity. For example, we've talked with some students who have already run their own campaign at Scripps College in California and gotten their dining hall to agree to remove shrimp from the menu. I think students have a really, great position to advocate for these kinds of changes. But even if you're not a student, even if you're just, someone in your community who wants to make a difference, we'd love to talk with you.